Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. Welcome to another video with me, Matthew Gill. Today is the 3rd of May. The year is ticking along nicely, and got a lot to talk about. So let's unpack some issues, shall we? I want to talk today, really primarily, about the furore around the Community of Christ's recent conference. As you know, the Community of Christ, for many years now, probably since the 80s, has been moving to a very, how would you say, left-wing position with regards to policy and with regards to their outlook on the restoration. I mean, before I start the video, I want to preempt this by saying that I do not believe that the Community of Christ are a restoration church. I don't believe they have any longer any place within the restoration family. I think they've moved so far one way that it's impossible any longer to call them a part of the restoration family, and we'll unpack a few of those things in a minute. But I want to talk to you today about their recent conference, and I had the unfortunate responsibility of reading through their 18-page document on changes that they're going to be making to church procedure. And there's everything in there you can think of, from taking a stance on racial issues to the climate emergency, as they call it, and all kinds of things. Removal of a section of the Doctrine and Covenants from Scripture, which I found, although it's not in our Doctrine and Covenants, they're removing a section of the Doctrine and Covenants. So let's see if I can go back a bit and do a bit of homework. Now, if I get a few things wrong on here, I apologise. I'm giving you my knowledge of the Reorganised Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and what is now called the Community of Christ. So, we know that the Community of Christ started out its life as the Reorganised Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, with its founding prophet being Joseph Smith III. And we know that for a very long period of time, they went through history with that title, and pretty much what I would consider to be a restoration foundation. Belief in the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, Joseph Smith the prophet, the plates, all that kind of stuff. That basic restoration message. And then there started to be some changes made in the 80s that many within the Reorganised Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints didn't like. And many people started to leave, because, as a friend of mine recently pointed out to me, they don't kick people out, people leave. So there was this mass exodus of people in the 80s, and in the 80s, and they formed what individually organised groups with no legal tie to one another. So these people left, they had no home to go to, so they started these individual groups. And then, of course, the RLDS changed their name, and over a lengthy period of time, they started to distance themselves from the Book of Mormon, its historicity, its value as scripture. They started to call into question Joseph Smith's role within the restoration. Was he really a prophet? They have embraced many Christian ethics, and really the Community of Christ isn't the RLDS Church. It's a completely new entity. what they've been able to do, because they stayed together as an organisation, although many people left, is they've managed to retain many buildings that were owned by the RLDS Church, such as the Kirtland Temple, land, and although they don't associate themselves, they associate themselves with the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith's rightful place at the top of the Restoration family, and the historicity of the Book of Mormon and its sacredness. They tend to trade on, in my opinion, their art, their Restoration roots, especially with their relationship with the LDS Church, for example. But they have been in a lot of financial difficulty for an organisation their size, and they've had to sell a lot of buildings. They've kept hold of the big assets, but I don't know how long they're going to be able to keep hold of those assets before, the big money comes swooping in, and next thing you know, the Kirtland Temple's in the hands of the LDS Church. But so basically, there was this big exodus in the 80s, and these individual branches were formed. The Restoration branch movement became a thing, and lots of different churches were formed. And from my information, from friends that I have, there are still around. They're still around, but they're rather small. These churches. There's the Restored Church, the Church of Jesus Christ Restored, the Remnant Church. They split in the last couple of years, but I do not know the name. So they've had another split. There are both the Conference of Elders and the Joint Conference of Restoration branches. Neither of those are functioning churches, but they are groups. My friend is a part of the JCRB, so that would be the Joint Conference of Restoration branches. He says there are probably more, but many of them may have gone. And so the RLDS Church, if you like, fractured, in my opinion, and the Community of Christ took its place and filled the void. And which is why the RLDS base is all over the place. If you go to Missouri, there's individual churches or organisations that have come out of the reorganisation. But the Community of Christ, because they held on to much of the money and the land and the titles, and to be honest, majority of the membership, formed themselves into this new organisation called the Community of Christ. As I say, they've been moving away from their Restoration foundation for a very long period of time. But one of the things that I found interesting in their official notes from their recent conference is their move towards acceptance of child baptism. It's under G4 and G4A of the Community of Christ official notes. If you want to go look at those online, you can get them at seaofchrist.org. They're available for most people to get online and have a look. And I won't read you all of the document because it is rather lengthy and rather wordy, as these things tend to be when you're talking about big organisations, and they tend to be very, very official documents. But basically, what they're doing is they are recognising child baptisms from other parts of Christianity and saying they don't need to be rebaptised when they reach the age of 8, that they'll accept child baptism within the organisation. And of course, as I've discussed this with other people, this will then tip down to eventually getting rid of baptism at the age of 8 and accepting child baptism, and them actually performing child baptisms. I think this is where the document is trying to set up, actually. My problem with this is, and this is why I say they've moved away from their Restoration foundation, is the Book of Mormon. Because the Book of Mormon is extremely clear about child baptism. It is extremely clear that it is a sin in the sight of God, that it is an abomination in his sight, and that it should not be done, it should not be practiced. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a Book of Mormon to hand at the moment, but it's in there. and it's very clear about the Book of Mormon's stance on child baptism. And in the Book of Mormon itself, it's very clear that the prophet Mormon, who's writing about this issue to his son Moroni, is very clear that child or infant baptism, as they call it, is a sin, is an abomination, because all children are saved in the sight of God. They don't need to be baptized. And then what happens later is when the church is reorganized under Joseph Smith, we get a series of revelations in the Doctrine and Covenants which clarify when baptism should take place and at what age it should take place. And this is great. This is fine for what I consider to be restoration believing branches or organizations, because they still adhere to the Book of Mormon and the Doctrine and Covenants. The problem with the Community of Christ, which is why I think they really shouldn't be mentioned in the same breath as the Restoration, is they no longer consider the Book of Mormon to be scripture. And they have messed about with the Doctrine and Covenants so much as to mean the same thing as the Book of Mormon. They no longer believe it's scripture. So all the things that the Lord said to Joseph Smith in the Doctrine and Covenants really don't mean anything. So you can change them and take away things. And like they're taking away, for instance, a section in the Doctrine and Covenants which no longer sits well with their current belief or thinking on certain issue. And then once you take away the Book of Mormon, and not just take away the Book of Mormon, but take away its historicity and say that it's not a book of scripture, then it's all open and it's open season. You can pick and choose and decide what bits you're going to believe in and what bits you're not going to believe in. And so what that does then is it denigrates Joseph Smith as not being a prophet of God, and it also allows you to do what they've done, which is pick and choose which bits you're going to believe in. Me personally, I think people should stop, and there are lots of YouTubers out there that still do this, by the way. They should stop treating the Community of Christ as a part of the Restoration family, or as non-Mormons like the Mormon family, because they're not. They are. I mean, even their new stuff in their official paperwork, it's moving so far away from a Restoration foundation to what I would consider to be a mainstream Christian organisation. Now, many people might say, well, that's a good thing, that they're embracing more Christian ideologies and more Christian ethics. The problem with that is some of those ethics and some of those doctrines do not jive with the Book of Mormon and the Restoration. Don't forget, the Restoration was to bring about a restoration of Christianity, a renewal of and putting things right that had gone wrong. And what they seem to be doing is going further and further and further and further left, and further and further and further socialistically, that I don't think you can consider them to be a part of the Restoration family. And this new move on baptism and membership is, quite frankly, an absolute travesty. It's absolute garbage. And anybody who considers the Community of Christ to be part of the Restoration family is deluding themselves. They are not. And I think they need to be started to be treated as such by YouTubers, by podcasters, because otherwise just throw open the door then and interview anybody within what you would consider to be the Mormon family. I mean, I don't consider polygamists to be part of the Restoration family. I mean, but people still interview them and talk about them as if they are. I do not believe they should be even in the same conversation, and neither should the Community of Christ. The Community of Christ are an absolute disgrace, and they are embracing all kinds of weird political stances that shouldn't be, and they're becoming more of an activist group than they are a Restoration Church or organisation. And they may own lots of land, and they may own the rights and deeds to the Kirtland Temple, which I think is unfortunate. but that's where their connection to the Restoration stops for me. They are also ordaining sisters to the high priest and elders quorum, which I think is wrong, and can be supported, I think, scripturally and historically with what Joseph Smith said about the sisters in Zion and the positions they should hold with regards to the priesthood. And that's another video, but I have mentioned this before in another video. And I wanted to come on today and just talk to you a little bit about what's going on within the community of Christ. I've seen a lot of people attend this recent conference, and I don't know whether they were asleep or whether they just decided not to listen or hear what some of these things said. But I've read them, and it's garbage. Real garbage. I mean, G4 and G4A on baptism and membership is just an absolute travesty. And what happens is when we keep participating with these people and giving them airtime and video time, is we're fueling their fire. And I personally think it's about time that people within the Restoration family started to stand up and say, this is wrong. This isn't what the Restoration is about. It's certainly not what the Book of Mormon is about. And that's the basis of the whole Restoration argument. If you take away the authenticity and historicity of the Book of Mormon and of Joseph Smith, it's crumbled. It's gone. There is no foundation, and it's open season, as the community of Christ are quite willing to attest to, in open forum and in printed format. And I just wanted to bring that to the attention of my general audience and the Restoration community in general. I think we need to do more now about bringing to light what exactly is the Restoration family, who it encompasses, why it encompasses these people, and what our aims and purposes are. And we can't do that as individual organisations. We need to come together as separate organisations, but with a general overview of what is exactly acceptable within the Restoration family. And most of that, if not all of that, should be based upon the Book of Mormon. We can't say with the Doctrine and Covenants, because there are some members of the Restoration family that don't use the Book of the Doctrine and Covenants, but pretty much everybody uses the Book of Mormon as a basis. And if the Book of Mormon says that child and infant baptism is an abomination before God, that's where it stops. That's it. That is law. And what gives you the right to say otherwise? Well, when you take away what it really means, when you don't use it as scripture, when you say it's an inspired, or if they don't even say that anymore, do they? They say it's a piece of writing from an era of time that has no relevance in our society today. Then it's open season on everything. You can do what you want. That's not what the Restoration is about. The Restoration is about organisations that have specific rules and doctrines and principles that need to be adhered to. Mostly principles, because the doctrine part is pretty simple, but the principles and rules that need to be adhered to, and some of those are pretty basic. That the Book of Mormon is true, that the Book of Mormon actually happened, the Nephites actually lived, that the Prophet Mormon actually lived and actually said in the Book of Mormon that was an issue. And that Joseph Smith did actually have plates, he did actually translate, and he did actually restore the Church of Jesus Christ upon the earth in his time. Once you take that away, you are not a part of the Restoration family, in my opinion. You have no right to call yourself as such. And as the restored branch of Jesus Christ, or the head of the restored branch of Jesus Christ, I have to speak up about this issue, because it's getting to be dangerous now. And as heads of organisations or leading members in organisations, we need to make a stance and we need to make our opinions known on this issue. This is a dangerous road, And I can see it only getting worse for the community of Christ. And but that doesn't matter to them because they're already on that road anyway. What matters is that people within the restoration stop referring to them as part of the family and own up to the fact that they're not, and deal with them in an appropriate manner. And that YouTubers and podcasters recognise this issue and bring it to the fore. Because if you're a stranger coming to the restoration and you didn't know, you'd think the Community of Christ were a legitimate restoration organisation, and they're not really. Just as polygamists aren't. So, that's my video for today. And I hope that it reaches people and you can actually see and wake up to the reality of what's going on here. Because it is dangerous when we start interpreting the scriptures in a way that we feel that it should be interpreted. The Book of Mormon should be taken as read. It should not be interpreted in any way. And if a prophet says that infant baptism is an abomination in the sight of God, that's it for me. This baptism and membership, you might as well take a match to it and burn it. Because I know God will. Because he already has. Because he's made a stance pretty clear about that. And we as parts of the restoration family need to stand up and be counted on these issues. And we need to stand up more, and we need to speak out more. So thank you for watching today. Thank you for bearing with me. I know there's a lot to go through today in today's video, but it was about unpacking this issue. And I think we need to, really unpack it. So hopefully we'll bring you some more videos. I'm on vacation very shortly, so I'll be out of touch for a while. But hopefully we're going to bring you some more content. It's been a bit light on the ground this year for lots of different reasons, but I hope you're enjoying what we bring you so far. So everybody, look after one another, be there for one another, and stand up for what is right and what is true. And have a great day, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.